lecture concerns itself with Rachel Imenu, with our mother Rachel. It's traditional that she is the one that people address prayers to for marriages and children. Rachel is probably the best known and the most motherly, if I can use that word, of all of our mothers. And she has a very tragic, difficult life. We found that all of our mothers, all the Amahos, had difficult lives, but Rachel excels in it. And some of it is of her own making, according to the rabbis. Out of all the mothers of Israel, Sarah is considered to be a prophetess, because God tells Avraham, "Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shma b'kolo." Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her, because she has the power of nevuah, of prophecy. But Rachel is also a prophetess. She also has the power of nevuah. The Gemara in Brachos describes her in that light. And she, all the mothers of Israel were beautiful, but she is considered to have been the most beautiful. And in fact, the Gemara says that Yosef, who it says Yafas Toar, Yafas Mare, who was so handsome and attractive, was a portion of the beauty of his mother. And she is a twin of Leah. As I mentioned last week, they were twins. They both married at the age of 22, but she dies at the age of 36. She dies 8 years before Leah dies. So she's married to Yaakov for 14 years. From the reading in the Torah, you cannot estimate the ages or the length of time that's involved here. But the Medrash fills us in on this. And by Jewish tradition, that's what we know, that she was married to Yaakov for 14 years. And she passes away at 36 in childbirth when Binyamin is born. Why did she die, so to speak, so young and before? The rabbis always pointed out to us how careful one has to be with speech, with what one says. My Rebbe in the yeshiva always used to say, you know, that when you're davening, he said, you be careful what you ask for, because he may be listening. We're confident that no one is listening, so we ask for everything, but it doesn't mean anything. She says to Yaakov Avinu, to her husband Yaakov, in the terrible frustration of not having children, while her twin has one child after another, and she wants to also be the mother of Israel, and she sees the window of opportunity closing upon her. So she says to him, Hoveli bonim, give me sons, give me children. V'mayin, and if you don't do it, Mesa anochi, I'm dead, I'm going to die. So the Gemara says, Nisnabo shehi Mesa b'mehera. She prophesied that. The Gemara says a rule, that kilalas tzaddik afilu al tanai, if a righteous person says a negative thing regarding oneself or regarding others, even if it's conditional, and the condition be not fulfilled, nevertheless, it still has an impression. It's not erased. And therefore, she said, Im ayin, and if I don't have children, meisa anochi. So she died in childbirth. She, so to speak, predicted her own end by that statement. So one has to always be careful, even though one doesn't hold that oneself is so righteous, but nevertheless one has to be very, very careful what one says, and especially in vernacular and slang we say terrible things. You know, a person says, you know, I'm dying for this car, right? So in slang it doesn't mean anything, right? But a car is a lethal weapon. Carries danger with it. So Jews were always careful. We're not only careful about lashon hara, about slander, and about defaming others, and about obscenities, but we're also careful about whatever we say and however we say it. And this is in a world where nobody is careful about that. And therefore, many times the troubles that befall our society in the eyes of Chazal are self-inflicted, because we said what was going to happen. I always hear with trepidation, you know, what our generals and what our politicians always say, you know, if this, that, and the other, and who knows, you know, shut up. Which is something that we are incapable of doing. Absolutely incapable of just being quiet. Don't say anything. Chazal said, Mila bechad, shtika betray. A word is worth 1 shekel, but silence is always worth 2 shekels. And when Jewish children, before they learned how to speak, when they were 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3 years old, whatever, so they didn't say that my child doesn't speak yet. They said, bis jetzt, until now, but er nit gesagt kein narische Wort. He didn't say one foolish thing yet. And the Yiddishisms always reflect a value. That's what makes Yiddish such a special language, because it reflects the value of the people. So Rachel, so to speak, is trapped in her own words, even though that obviously is not her intent. But this rule pertains. I knew a Jew in Detroit who was a yeshiva student in Lithuania in 1932. And the Chafetz Chaim was still alive, very, very old man. Then he received a notice from the Polish army. He's being drafted into the Polish army. So the yeshiva students who received such notices and were not anxious to serve in the Polish army would go to the Chafetz Chaim for a bracha, that he should give them a blessing that they don't have to go to the army. So he told me the story himself. He comes in by the Chafetz Chaim, he's very old and feeble, and he tells him in his ear, Rebbe, you know, I got this for the preziv, I have to stand in front of the draft board, the army, they're going to take me to the army. Rebbe, give me a bracha. So the Chafetz Chaim said to him, listen, there have to be Jewish soldiers in the Polish army also. So he went out destroyed. And they took him in the Polish army, and they trained him to be a medic, a chovesh, someone that tends the wounded on the battlefield, God forbid. And so he served 2 years in the Polish army, and then he was discharged. In 1934, he's discharged. He goes back to the yeshiva. And he wants to know what his sin was that the Chofetz Chaim said to him, there have to be Jewish soldiers in the army. And the Chofetz Chaim is no longer alive to ask. Comes 1939 and the war breaks out. And the Polish army mobilizes all the reserves, which he was in the reserves. And he goes to the army, and they station him on the eastern part of Poland, which in a few weeks was overrun by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union took all the Polish soldiers and sent them to Siberia. Stalin's solution to everything. So Menachem Begin also went to Siberia. They all went to Siberia, where in the Gulag you're not going to last too long. In 1941, the beginning of 41, Hitler invades the Soviet Union. Stalin is certain that it can't happen to him, and it happens to him. And now he needs help. He needs help from England, he needs help from the United States, from the Western powers. So Winston Churchill, who negotiated the arrangement, said, we're going to help you. In his famous speech in the House of Commons, Churchill said, if the devil would fight Hitler, I would have a few good words to say about hell. So they demand that all the Polish prisoners be released, and they're going to make a Polish army, which they did. General Andres with the Polish army, it fought in Italy and later it fought in Europe. Very bloody battles. And then after the war was over, Stalin sent them all back again. But a lot of the Jews in the Polish army, when they got out of Siberia, didn't go back to the army. They walked across borders. Begin walked here to the land of Israel. It's a walk. It's almost as far as the Shuk. It's a long walk. That's how he comes to the country. My friend that I knew, he ends up somehow in America, and he ends up in Detroit. And he says all of those that got the bracha from the Chofetz Chaim who were not in the army got killed in the Holocaust. And the Chofetz Chaim told him that there has to be Jewish soldiers in the Polish army, so he felt that that was not a blessing, and he didn't understand what it was, and he said now he lived to see that the Chofetz Chaim gave him the ultimate blessing because of the fact that he was in the Polish army, he was able to be saved. So words have an effect, and especially words of holy people, and therefore the words that she uses rebound against her. Because she said, Imayin Mesa Anochi. If not, then, So in heaven they heard it. Now, the famous story with Rachel and Yaakov are in love with each other. It says in the Torah, Vayeoveha, he loved her so that the 7 years that he worked for her were like nothing. Ba'avoso oso. And Rachel knows from the moment that she meets Yaakov that they're destined for each other. Sometimes people are fortunate that they meet the mate that they're going to marry and they know it right away. Another story I'll tell you about the Chofetz Chaim is that a young man in his yeshiva came to him and he said, Rebbe, I met this girl and she's the nicest girl and everything and it's wonderful. So he said, so what's wrong? So he said, there's no money. There's no nadan, no dowry. So the Chofetz Chaim said to him, dowry is a moshel. Sometimes if you don't understand something, you have to give a moshel. You have to explain it and explain it. If you understand without the moshel, then what's the problem, right? So they know they're destined for each other. But she tells Yaakov in advance, the Medrash says, she tells him in advance, dear, you should know my father is the world's greatest cheater. And you should know that in our society, lo yaseh ein bimkomenu, they will not marry off the younger one, even though we're twins, but she's older than I am. And my father will not allow me to marry you as long as Leah is unmarried. Now, that's a problem that occurs in many families. That's for one reason or another, the older daughter finds it difficult to find the right one, and there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 backed up. So what do? So like in many things in life, there are no good answers. Whatever you do is not going to be terrific. But it's not fair to the other ones, right? So she tells that to Yaakov. So Yaakov says, don't worry, I'm as big a cheater as he is. If I have to be, I'm the champion cheater also. I'm his brother in that. Because Yaakov has the experience of, so to speak, having fooled his father to obtain the brachos, to circumvent Esav. And Yaakov, in spite of being an Ish Tom Yoshev Oholim, he says, don't worry, I'm a match for your father, which is what all sons-in-law say, and rarely are. She says to him, no, you're not. There's a lot, the Medrash is here, the whole conversation. She says, you're not. You'll see you're not. And he says, I am. Comes the time for the wedding, and Rachel realizes that her father is going to substitute Leah for her at the wedding night. Yaakov, in order to, he also suspected that such a thing could happen, so he and Rachel devised a system of codes, so to speak, signs between each other, intimate signs that they would know, that he would know that this is Rachel and not Leah. It seems from the Medrash that indicates that they were even identical twins, which would explain why in the dark, so to speak, he could make such a mistake. The Medrash has another answer, that in order that the voice of Rachel should be there, that Rachel actually hid in the room. And when he asked questions, she answered instead of Leah. But in any event, she gives Leah the code, because she does not want her sister to be embarrassed publicly. And because of that, she is rewarded in the future. The Gemara says, why was she zoche that the first king of Israel, Shaul HaMelech, should be her descendant from the tribe of Binyamin? So to speak, she beats Leah to the Malchus, to the royalty, because David is from Leah, tribe of Yehuda. But she is the mother of the tribe of Binyamin. So the rabbis say, because of the fact that she sacrificed herself in such a difficult situation in order not to shame her sister. And that becomes the hallmark of Rachel. Her concern for others, her sensitivity for others, even at the expense of her own self-interest. Really, it's something that to us would be unimaginable. The Gemara in Baba Basra says that Yaakov sent her gifts, and Lavan confiscated the gifts and gave them to Leah. And later when they're married, Yaakov says to her, what happened to my gifts? And she said, I could not shame my sister. So when the gifts came, I said they were for her. A relationship with Leah is naturally strained. First of all, two women married to the same man at the same time, under any circumstances, strained. But on the other hand, there's a great attachment that the two have to each other. And the Medrash quotes her as saying to Yaakov, when she is barren and has no children, she says, Im ein ani kedai sheyiboneh olam mimeni. If the Jewish world will not be built for me, for whatever reason, yiboneh me'achosai, let it be built from my sisters. Because we'll discuss next week, Bila and Zilpah are also her sisters. So there is a selflessness here that really defies any understanding. Chazal say that when Yaakov met Rachel, so he kissed her and he wept, because he sensed already that there's going to be a problem here. She's not going to be buried with him. So in spite of his great love for her, he also finds himself in a situation where, to a great extent, he's helpless. Can't deal with it. In the Torah it says, "Vatakane Rochel ba'achosa," that Rochel was jealous of her sister. So the rabbis modified that. They said, we're not talking here about jealousy of a person. She was jealous of Leah because she felt Leah must have been such a righteous woman. That's why she has children. And that's why the world will be built from her, the Jewish world. So she's better than I am. So she is jealous of her goodness, which she now will attempt to emulate. But we see the tension in the house when Yaakov's answer to her. And she says, Hova libonim, give me children. So he says, Ha'atachas Elohim anochi asher mona mimech priboten. What am I, God, who has not given you fertility? And he says to her in the Lashon of the Medrash, I have children. So what do you want from me? The Gemara says, is that the way to talk to someone at a time like that? Is that the response? So to speak, to pour salt into the wound? And therefore, the whole house of Israel pays a price for all of this drama that we see about. All the tensions. Everything that's recorded, the Torah tells it to us so that we should realize that somehow all of this plays into events that happen to us, even thousands of years later, that we're unaware of where the source is. But you don't talk like that to somebody. Gemara says, Kach omrim, this is the way you talk to people that are despondent, that need encouragement. I had a professor in law school. And law school is a very terrible place. It really is, because all the professors are, not all, but many of the professors are cruel people. They all think they should be Supreme Court justices, and they're not. So in law school, they call upon people every day to present the cases that were going to be discussed. And if you didn't prepare the case correctly or you don't do a good job, they absolutely rip you to shreds. So I remember once one of the students reported on a case, and he didn't do a very good job. He couldn't explain the rationale of what the court meant, and he didn't understand the principle of law that lay behind it, and he hemmed and hawed. So the professor said to him, he said, do you have an inferiority complex? So he said, I don't know. He says, I don't think so. I just think you are inferior. So is that the way you talk to somebody? I mean, the guy was shot for the whole semester. Probably today he is a judge, for all I know, but the Chazal say, that you don't talk that way to people that are, that are in such a condition. And if you did, so then you'll hear it back. I always said to my 16-year-old students in the yeshiva, they should remember every word they say to their parents, because they'll hear it repeated verbatim to them 20 years later. The Ramban has an interesting outlook on this. The Ramban says, how did Yaakov marry sisters? Which is forbidden in the Torah. So they're both alive, it's forbidden. So how did he do such a thing? Because the rabbi said that even by Avraham Avinu already, they had an intuition as to what the Torah values were and what the mitzvot would be. So then how does he transgress over that? So the Ramban says that the Isur, the prohibition, only applied in Eretz Yisrael. But in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, as of that time, there was no prohibition. So he says that that's why Rochel died when they came to Eretz Yisrael, because the moment he came to Eretz Yisrael, so then he couldn't remain with the two sisters. And the Ramban says from that, the great rule, that Eretz Yisrael is a very special place, but it's also a very dangerous place. And that, so to speak, things you can get away with in Chutz La'aretz, you can't get away with here. And that the standard here is raised automatically. And that therefore, Yaakov, the ensuing tragedy occurs because of the fact that Yaakov comes back there to Israel with both wives. Now, Yaakov works, as we mentioned, 14 years for Leah and for Rachel. In the period of time, Leah has children. Then he works another 6 years in the house of Lavan in order to acquire wealth, right? And he's 2 years on the road, so he's separated 22 years, which is the amount of time Yosef also was separated from them. Again, how things in the Torah are exact. God's judgment is very fine. So he calls Rachel and Leah out, and he says, I explained to them what your father has done to me, etc., etc., and therefore we're going to leave. But I'm afraid he won't let us leave, so we have to sneak out. We have to go in the middle of the night, pack the bags, get the kids ready, we're going. Rachel, in the meanwhile, has already given birth to Yosef. He's ready to go. And they agree. They say, Ahod lanu chelek, we have no share anymore with our father. and he took everything from us, and he's abused us, and he's exploited us. We're going with you, Yaakov. We're going to escape. And they leave. And they come to the land of Israel. Now, Yaakov is pursued by Lavan. And the father-in-law says to him, Abonim bonai, abonos benosai, where are my children, my grandchildren? What do you mean you leave? How do you do that? You going on Aliyah? And what about us? The Medrash says, he says, I'm an old man, who's going to take care of me? Am I old? Pull out all the stops of guilt which exist without saying it, but he says them all. Because he's Lavan. He lays the whole guilt trip on him. And then he says, in my house I had trophim. I had these house gods. The trophim were house gods that the houses had, that the pagans had. So it was either a goddess of fertility, and it was a god of blessing, it was one for cooking. It was all, they had you got a god for everything. And everybody had these trophim. If you see here in the Israel Museum, you can see them, or in the Bible Lands Museum, you can certainly see them, what the trophim were in the ancient times. So, he says, you stole them. Loma ganavtas Elohim. What are you stole my gods, right? Well, you say you're a religious man. You say everything that you say is God and God and God, right? And you stole my religion. You took my faith away from me. You took all the trophim. And Yaakov, in righteous indignation, without realizing that Rachel had taken them, and Rachel took them because she wants to do her father the favor that he should not have idols in the house. So she interferes. So it was l'shem shamayim, right? She was certainly did it for the sake of heaven. She wanted to save her father from paganism. But still, stealing is stealing is stealing. And therefore Yaakov says the fateful words. Wherever you find it, lo yichyeh, well, I will not allow that person to live, will not live. Because he is certain that what? That no one has them. And he, Lavan searches every place, and he doesn't find. He went to Oel Rochel, Oel Leah, the Oel Shvochos, he can't find them. And then Yaakov says to him in righteous indignation, Loma mishashto kol keloi, what, you put your hands on everything that I own, you look through all the drawers and everything. Did you find anything that's yours? Put it down here and we'll have a judgment. What's yours? Below Yoda Yaakov ki Rochel genovasa. So the rabbis say here, only the rabbis can say these things. And again, we're not talking about ordinary people here. Even Lavan is not the ordinary person. I always say the Kotzker said that, we think Esav looks like John Gotti. He says Esav trucked a streimel with a zupiche, you can't tell Esav from the outside what he looks like. None of this is as simple as we make it. But Yaakov says, can't be. And she stole them. So she, so to speak, the rabbis say is in character. Because she fooled Yaakov on behalf of her sister Leah, right? Yaakov is the victim there. So even though she does it famously and righteously on behalf of her sister, But the act that she does is an act of deception against her husband. So here too, even though she does this righteously and with the highest motives and purposes imaginable, but the act that she does is stealing. And therefore Yaakov's curse comes upon her. And the fact that she did it for a wonderful cause does not change the action. And then again, she deceives her father because she lies to him. She's sitting on the camel, in the bag of the camel are the trophim, and she says it's because of her physical period that she's unable to get up, to get off the camel, you know. So everything is l'shem shamayim, but there's a price l'shem shamayim that everybody pays. Chazal have a great discussion in the Gemara a number of times about the concept of mitzvah bo b'dei aveira. A mitzvah that comes through an aveira. Is it a mitzvah? Is there any credit for the mitzvah? So the mere fact that it's discussed in the Talmud and discussed at length regarding many matters indicates that there's a problem with it. Chazal say on the posuk, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, you shall pursue righteousness. So the Gemara says, tzedek, tzedek, why does it say twice? Righteous ends through righteous means. If the means are not righteous, the fact that the ends are righteous does not per se make it a positive thing. And we see that reflected in her life. That all of these things come back to haunt her, so to speak. And they come back to haunt her children as well. The brothers will say to Binyamin, when Yosef plants the cup, the silver cup in the bag of Binyamin, and Menashe searches and finds it, so they say to him, Ganev ben, your mother was a Ganev. Genetic by you. So, decades later, under a whole different set of circumstances, it's 37 years later, they remind him of the fact that Rachel took the trophy of her father. So they said, maybe you also had a holy reason for taking the cup, because Yosef used the cup to be a soothsayer, right, to say the future. They didn't realize what was happening. So you took the cup in order that he shouldn't know where we are, and that we'd be able to get away with everything because he needs the cup to know. But you took the cup. You stole it. So you're a Ganev just like your mother was a Ganev. And that's baked in. That's in the DNA. We have to pray that it's always a recessive gene, but it's not always a recessive gene. Chazal saw in this whole episode of this family all of the difficulties that exist in the Jewish world throughout the ages. My Rebbe used to say that's why you have Jewish hoodlums, gangsters. They're doing it for a good purpose. I remember a famous story with Golda Meir that Bugsy Siegel made a parlor meeting for her. You know, and when Bugsy Siegel sent you an invitation to the parlor meeting, everybody showed up. And they showed up with envelopes full of cash. And, you know, and it was used to purchase arms for Israel in the 1948 in the difficult times. but it was Bugsy Siegel money. And it has an influence. It has an influence, even though it's for positive things. And I knew a great Rosh Yeshiva that wouldn't take money that they felt was tainted. They wouldn't take money from people who they felt were not Sabbath observant. He said, you can't build a yeshiva on that money. Sooner or later it catches up with you. So all of this is expressed here in this drama between Rachel, Yaakov, and Lavan. The Medrash says that Lavan searched Rachel's tent twice, because it says Vayovo be'ohel Rachel. Again, Vayovo. Came again, because he suspected her. He suspected her because of the story with Leah, that she gave Leah to Simonim, etc. He suspected her. In the Zohar it says, I just want to read the words to you so you don't think that I made this up. Afal pi sherochel osas zos lakor avodah zora meisavia. Even though her entire purpose was in order to remove paganism from her father's house, nenshu al zeh, she was punished. Shelo zochsa lagadel es binyamin, that she was unable to raise her second child, Binyamin. Below iskaimo ito afilu shoachas, she didn't have him, she died in childbirth. Why? Mipnei tsar aviyah, because of the tsar that she caused to her father. Afal gav sheiskavnu letova, even though her kavona, her intent was holy and pure and correct, it doesn't erase the other part of the equation. So we see here fearsome things. And many times in life it happens this way. So we can't judge, but the situation is repeats itself in life. The rabbis say a tremendous idea, frightening idea, that she died in childbirth, so therefore Binyamin, who was not raised by Rachel, so there was not the Rachel-Leah competition, so Binyamin took no part in the sale of Yosef. He was the only one that was out of the loop completely. Everybody else is guilty. All of the 11 brothers. Binyamin is innocent completely. And the Gemara says that that's why Shevet Binyamin did not go with the 10 tribes when the 10 tribes broke off from Malchus Beis David. When the 10 tribes left the Davidic royal line at the time of Rechavam, and Yerovam established the kingdom of the north under the leadership of the tribe of Ephraim, of Yosef. So one would think that Binyamin should go with Yosef, right? But Binyamin didn't go. Binyamin remained with the Davidic dynasty because of the fact that he never was part of this. He never was part of this tension in the family. There are two opinions as to when Rachel died. One opinion is that she died in the period of Sfira, between Pesach and Shavuos. And because it says Kivras Eretz, Kivras Eretz is that the earth was still dry. It became dry already. In the rainy season, there's mud, the earth is moist, but by now, after Pesach already, there's no more rain, the earth begins to dry, and that's what Kivras Eretz means. There were clods of earth, dried. The second opinion is that she died on the 11th day of Mar Cheshvan, which is the day that is usually commemorated here in the land of Israel because it's an exact date. That date is quoted in the Yalkut Shimoni, which is the 12th century in Germany. And there's a tradition that that's the date, the Yortzeit, the date is the 11th of Mar Cheshvan. We have the story of the fact that she takes the flowers from Ruvain and tells Yaakov that night he should live with Leah, which the Gemara felt also was insensitive to Yaakov, like you're trading him. And therefore Leah has extra sons, so to speak, and has a daughter, Dinah, while Rachel has the bare minimum. And the Gemara says that that's why she was not zoche to be buried with him. And Leah was, because of the fact, so when she said, he will not sleep with me tonight, in heaven they heard, he will not sleep with you forever. In the long night till the resurrection. Well, we see how almost frightening the judgments here are regarding her life. Nevertheless, and probably the most poignant, one of the most poignant scenes in the Torah is when Yaakov tells Yosef that I want you to bury me, take me home, bury me in the Morat HaMachpelah. And he says, and then you'll say to me, well, why did I not do that to your mother? Why did I bury her on the road? So he says, the Vani bevoi mipadon, when I was coming back from the house of Lavan, from Aram Naharaim, Mesa Olai Rachel. Rachel died to me. Because I'll say, Ein isha Mesa L'Labayla. Person dies, so that it dies to everyone, but to the spouse, it's a different thing completely. Mesa Olai Rachel. And he said, I'm bereft the rest of my life because of it. I'm given to sadness. The Ruach HaKodesh departed from me. V'ekbereo shom b'derech beis lechem, b'derech Efros hi beis lechem. And I buried her on the road near Efrat, which is the city of Beis Lechem. And they said, V'hi makom kuroso ad hayom. And that is where she remains until today. So one of the oldest traditions in the Jewish world is that our mother Rachel is buried in that spot. Now the old traditional picture that we had of Kever Rachel, with the little dome, it was because that was an empty field. The Arabs had not built the city of Beis Lechem out to it, and it was all empty. Though there was an Arab cemetery nearby, and it was the tradition that was where her grave was. Moses Montefiore, in the middle of the 1800s, in his many projects on behalf of the Jewish people, built that building, built the old traditional building of Kever Rachel. Today, Kever Rochel is a fortress because of the wisdom of our leaders, who were even willing to give it away. Only at the last minute, so they moved off 100 yards. Because to them it doesn't mean anything. It's all territory here. So he says to him, I buried her on the road. So the Medrash says, what has he said? He said there'll be a day when the Jewish people will go into exile. There'll be a time when they will need a mother's tears. Somebody will have to care about them. And since she'll be on the road and she'll see her children marching off to exile, so that's the famous verse in the Novi Yirmiyahu, Kol Nehi Baroma Nishma. The voice of sadness, of wailing is heard on high. Rachel Mevako al Boneho. Our mother Rachel weeps for us. Me'an Oli Inochem. She accepts no comfort. Ki einenu, because they're not here. So he said that's why she was buried on the road. Because she has to remain the mother of Israel through all the ages. And in all the ages there will be more shadow than light. More difficulties than solutions. More troubles than goodness. So somebody has to be there, right? The child falls, so the child picks oneself up and runs to the mother. So that's the mother Rachel. That she will remain forever that symbol. Hi omedes umevakeshes rachamim aleim. VaHaKadosh Baruch Hu shomea tfilosa. And the Gemara says further, it's a psichta, Bishvil Rochel ani machzer es Yisrael imkomam. V'shovu bonim ligvulam. The sons will return home, means to return home to Rachel. So that even though the Moras HaMachpelah has got Abraham and Sarah and Rivka and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Leah, emotionally, Kever Rachel was stronger always in Jewish ideas and Jewish heart. And you'll see that in Jewish homes, I remember when I grew up, almost every Jewish home had a picture of Kever Rachel. You didn't have a picture of the Moras HaMachpelah. You didn't even have a picture of the Mokom HaMikdash or of the Kotel Maravi. But a Jewish home without a picture of Kever Rachel somehow was deficient. So it was like having people have, in their home, they have their parents' picture, their grandparents' picture, because that gives one a sense of continuity. Comes from someone, not alone. And Rachel, therefore, remains our mother. So in spite of everything that we've discussed here, and the difficulties of her life, and of the terrible vicissitudes that overcame them, in the long run of history and of Jewish thought and Jewish values, Rachel is our mother, more so than anyone else. And Chazal saw it that way. Chazal said, Mokom kvuroso lo nelam ad hayom hahu. Her grave was never lost. Always knew where it was. Ad she'osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachayos meisim. Until the time when God will revive the dead, we always will know what place where Rachel is buried. So there'll be a place for Jews to come and pray. The Ramban writes, when he came here in 1267, one of the first things he did was go to pray at Kever Rachel. The Rambam, when he came to Eretz Israel in the late 1100s, so he was here for a few weeks. He fled because of the fact that the Crusaders threatened to kidnap him and hold him for ransom. So therefore he had to flee the country, and he went to Egypt. But he said, I had the privilege of going to the grave of Rachel Imenu and praying there. But he says for giving thanksgiving for the fact that I arrived in Eretz Israel. So we find this idea throughout Jewish history, that the hopes and aspirations and beliefs of the Jewish people are, so to speak, centralized in Rachel Imenu, in our mother Rachel. And that's what the Gemara means when it says that when the women of Beis Lechem, who were from the tribe of Yehuda, who were children of Leah, blessed Ruth when she converted and came and married Boaz. So they said to her, Yesimech Elohim keRachel v'Leah. They said Rachel first, even though Leah is their mother. Asher bonu shteihem as Beis Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Somu Rachel lifnei Leah. Hodu, they admitted that Rachel was the Akeres Abayis. That Rachel was the main one. And so it's remained throughout Jewish history and Jewish thought that Rachel remains that way for us.